Let me turn to Pete Hegseth and his recent statement that I'm going to go through it because it's very important. Now, I will say before I even go into it that a federal judge, this is another district judge, has already put a hold on this. And put a hold on this on a preposterous justification, which I'll mention in a moment. Let's begin by looking at what Pete Hegseth says. Different physical standards for men and women in the U.S. military have existed for a long time. But, he says in all caps, there were also combat roles that were male only. Then, he says under Obama, all combat roles were open to men and women, but, again in all caps, different physical fitness standards for men and women remained. Today, he says, we fix this. All combat roles are open to men and women, but they must all meet the same high standard. No standards will be lowered, and all combat roles will only have sex-neutral standards. Common sense. It is common sense, isn't it? Because if you have a rule that says only men in the military, there's going to be someone who says, well, here's a woman and she's a rock climber and she's a star athlete and she's a crack shot and she can meet all the standards, and why are you excluding her? And so basically Hegseth goes, we're not going to define our standards with reference to gender or sex at all. We're just going to define the standards. This is what you need to do to be able to do the job. If you can do it, you're going to be let in. If 99% of the people who are let in are male, so be it. If it's 80%, so be it. So nothing could be, in a way, more sort of sane than to deploy a gender-neutral standard in the same way that we have, for example, a race-neutral standard. We don't have separate standards for blacks or whites, and we don't need to have separate military standards for genders either. But the judge steps in and says this standard discriminates against the people who can't meet the standard. Wow. Think about that. All standards do that, right? A standard that says you have to jump over 5 feet to be qualified for the Olympics discriminates against people who can't jump over 5 feet. So this is the kind of utter irrationality that these liberal judges are bringing to, I think, essentially muck up these orders and just delay them. There's no way this is going to stand up, and it's like beyond time for the courts to step in and intervene and shut down this now coordinated operation of, it's like death by, I won't say 1,000 cuts, but it's like death by 50 cuts with 50 different liberal judges, all of them, by the way, carefully shopped for by various plaintiffs. And then the judge doesn't just give relief to that plaintiff, but issues a nationwide injunction. One thing worth noting about these nationwide injunctions, by the way, is that they have no authorization in statutory law. There's no law that says a judge can make these kinds of nationwide injunctions. The statutory or legal authority just does not exist. And then you might think, well, you know, maybe there's a landmark Supreme Court case that somehow interpreted the Constitution, even though the Constitution doesn't say anything about this either, that there's some landmark Supreme Court case that says the judges have this kind of authority and this is the way our judicial system works. But go look for that Supreme Court case. It doesn't exist either. And so the point I'm trying to make is we have this customary practice of these judges issuing these injunctions. In the past, it's been exercised with much more discretion, but now promiscuously against Trump. This is something that has to be stopped.